We continue to look at the ongoing political unrest in Mozambique, triggered by, of course, the disputed election results. We're now joined by Border Management Authority's Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Mmemme Mogotsi. Good afternoon, Ms. Mogotsi. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let's start with the situation at the Libombo port of entry today. How has it been?
Good afternoon, Alicia. I just wanted to highlight that there's no blockages at the border at this point. The movement is normal but very low at this point. The trucks that have been at the border are now stationary, and there's no movement, but we are processing pedestrians as well as small vehicles that are crossing in and out of Mozambique at this point. So we don't have any incidents to report at this point, but just to assure the viewers that the Border Management Authority is on high alert with all the deployments on the ground to ensure that, they process any passenger that comes through, and they're able to, make sure that there are no reports that or incidents that are reported at the Libombo port.
Do you perhaps have data on hand of the number of people you processed on this day last year in comparison to the number of people processed this year, to almost give us a sense of the impact that this instability on the other side in Mozambique has had on the movement of people between the two countries?
Processing up until 1 o'clock today, we were able to process about 1,000 arrivals, people that were coming into South Africa, and we were able to process around 1,200 departures, people who were leaving South Africa going into Mozambique, which gives us a status statistics of about 2,200. At this point last year, we were able to process around 10,000 travelers the same time in 2023. So you can see that it's a significant decrease in terms of passenger movement in this regard. So, but we understand that, there are challenges in Mozambique. We are not worried at this point because the movements in other ports of entries are being processed as normal. The numbers that we are seeing, the figures that we saw last year are more or less the same, except just for a few ports of entries that have seen a decrease. But the others, if you look at OR Tambo, which normally leads in terms of the numbers for ports of entries, it is now recorded around 395,000 passengers that have been processed in and out of OR Tambo at this point, which is a big increase from the 350,000 that were processed last year. So you can see there is movement in our ports of entry, just that Libombo is affected by this unrest.
Now, speaking of other ports of entries, you've been encouraging commuters to use the Managa port of entry if they want to travel to Mozambique. Has this diversion not led to perhaps high volumes at that port of entry specifically? And are you coping? Do you have capacity there?
At this point, we have not recorded any increased movement. Actually, the situation in Libombo and in Managa is the same at this point, with low processing being experienced at this point. So the diversion to Managa was in case that there's going to be suspension of operations at Libombo. So at this point, there hasn't been any increased movement in Managa because Libombo has not been fully affected, except for the cargo trucks that are parked, that are stationary on the corridor, and some in the port of entry. But we are ready for any eventuality. We have increased our deployments also at Managa to ensure that, travelers are able to be processed there should there be any disruptions in Libombo. And you'd understand that in Managa, they are entering into Eswatini first before they go to Mozambique. So we have had engagements with the immigration specialist and the chief of immigration of Eswatini. We had a meeting with him where there were discussions in terms of modalities of assisting the pedestrians as well as private vehicles that will be coming through that area in case Libombo is affected in terms of processing.
All right. Mmemme, thank you very much for that update. That's BMA Deputy Assistant Commissioner Mmemme Mogotsi.